Hello, everybody. Welcome to our brand new podcast, Caffeine and Canines, where we're going to monthly, as best we can, share a coffee, pick a topic to do with dogs, and discuss it. So this week we're going to look at puppies. I think it's prevalent at the moment for two reasons. One, it's almost New Year's Eve. It's almost 2022, and we've got a lot of Christmas puppies coming in. And two, my co-host here, Ian Kirk, has gone and got himself a puppy, something he told me he'd never do, but he has. So,
not only that, but I said I would never get a Christmas puppy.
I'd never get a Christmas puppy, and it's a French Bulldog puppy of all puppies. I tried to get him to get a proper dog, like a German Shepherd, but he refused. So here we are. We've gone and got a Frenchie. Kirky, how's it going? You've got your puppy Christmas Eve.
Christmas Day in the end.
Christmas
Due
Day.
to some logistical issues.
In the end. So, very cliche indeed.
It couldn't be more cliche.
Couldn't be more cliche. How's it gone so far? We're now currently on the 29th of December, so you're 5 days in, something like this.
Yeah, well, 4 nights in. She doesn't do that much. She's a 9-week-old puppy.
Yep.
She had a little bit of an upset stomach, which is probably worth addressing. Like, it's something you might expect when you initially take the puppy away from litter, mum, etc., etc. It's quite a stressful experience.
Yep.
So she had a little bit of the runs for maybe 16 hours, 24 hours or so.
Yep.
That all seems fixed up. She's had a health check today. Couple of little bits we're kind of struggling with at the moment, but we're going to address those within this, I think, anyway, with some questions that are very close to the bone in that respect.
So we've put out on our mailing list the opportunity for folk to ask questions. We've also put it on our social media, so we've compiled a list of questions here. Some were overly specific, which we'll leave out because we want to cover as many of our audience as possible with the questions. There is one question that was prevalent throughout both, and we'll leave that till last, and that will be puppy biting. So we'll circle back to that. So we have got a couple of questions here. What have we got first? Okay, my dog has been off the lead and she has been great. She is now 16 weeks. However, the last 2 times she has run away from me and has been sat on the doorstep, and then again at the local shop the second time. Now I'm scared to let her off again. Any advice? First thoughts on that, Kirky?
Without being too cutting, don't lay off in the first place.
Yeah.
Dogs aren't automatically loaded with commands, like recall commands, I assume that's kind of getting at.
Yep.
So it's something you do have to teach. When they're younger, obviously they've got a decent social drive, so they'll kind of hang around with you a little bit anyway.
Yep.
But they don't actually know an official recall, would be my kind of initial take on it.
Yeah, so I would agree with everything you've just said. I think puppies give us a false sense of security. Yeah. They naturally come with a sense of dependency. They're a little bit apprehensive about the world around them. They will follow you nice and close. But as soon as they find value elsewhere, or worse, they get spooked, they're probably going to bolt, and that's probably what's happened here. So for me, 16 weeks is far too young to be letting a dog off a lead. You want to be using a long line, or dare I say it, a flexi lead until you have a solidified recall command and you have off-lead control of that dog. So from my experience, people have brought me puppies or young adult dogs at 6-7 months, and they always say the same thing. My dog was great off a lead until, and it's usually the 6-7 month mark, because that's when they've got a little bit more confident, they've got a little bit braver, they start exploring the big world, they find reinforcement elsewhere, and suddenly we go, ooh, well, my dog was never off-lead trained at all. It just felt like it needed to hug me because it wasn't sure about the world around it. But like I said, when the dog gets more confident, they start exploring, they find value elsewhere, and sooner rather than later, we go out of the picture. So back onto the long line, lots of engagement work, teach recall, yada, 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 but stop letting that puppy off a lead, because I guarantee the second time there will be a third time, and you're probably, unfortunately, a little bit back now, but that's fine. Start from scratch, treat her like she's 12 weeks old again, and build back up. Anything else to comment on that?
It's probably worth addressing why, and even you get this even with adult dogs, why people think the dog needs to be off the lead necessarily.
Yeah.
And it's probably good in terms of, like, yes, they can explore more, but it's a ticking time bomb in terms of running into these problems. And you can probably tick most boxes that a dog needs with a long line or a long flexi or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. What's a 20-foot, 30-foot long line trailing on a puppy? How much is it going to inhibit their fulfillment of not running around? And we get this a lot with gun dogs and pointers and beastlers. Owners are adamant these dogs are to be let off a lead, but it takes one ignored recall. It takes one kind of wrong thing to go. It takes one thing to go wrong, and then eventually, worst case scenario, your dog goes and runs off to the wrong dog, gets hit by a car, yada yada yada. Best case scenario is your dog's recall gets weaker. So put your dog on a long line, teach a solid recall, and go from there.
Yeah.
Next question. What is it?
How do I put a harness on or a collar on my fresh French Bulldog puppy without getting bitten?
So I would say naturally the lead is a tool which inhibits behaviour. It stops things. Yeah, you can't run away. You can't run out the door. You can't do this, and this. It's a physical barrier. So therefore, a puppy initially isn't going to enjoy having these things on because they're going to figure out very quickly that it's something that stops them doing what they want. So if I was introducing a lead or collar to a puppy, I would just be introducing it at short spells, typically around feeding time, and then back off. Typically, I would put that lead on when I'm associating it with something the dog wants to do. But whereas we're in a world of reactive puppy owners at the moment, they're going to use the lead when they want to stop their dog doing something. But we want to create a positive response to that lead. So around food time, around play time, walkies is a given. And then other than that, I would be using it every time or a lot of the time when my dog comes out the crate. So they start seeing the lead as instead of an inhibitor to freedom, but as an access to freedom. Yeah.
For sure.
Do you have anything on that?
Yeah, so like if someone has already got them in themselves a tangle of trying to get it on and getting bitten, is there anything they can do acutely to address that?
In that moment?
In the moment. Because if it's become habitual and that's always what the puppy does, and it already knows that it means a restriction of X, Y, Z, it's probably going to be a little process, isn't it, until we can reverse that by doing what you've just said.
There's definitely things they shouldn't do. Yeah. So if the picture is the dog is biting you and you're looking like this, come on, Lola, get the lead on, and you're flailing your arms around as well and you're kind of making a game out of it, or you're chasing the dog out the living room. So first things first, put the puppy in the crate. Use your crate as somewhere that they can't run away and find reinforcement. Make everything nice and calm as best as you can. What you don't want to do is be reinforcing that kind of the game the dog is in or the contest that the dog is in where they're saying, no, I don't want that bloody thing on me, by running around and biting you and things like this. All very calm, all very kind of straight to the point with that sort of thing. But yeah, you don't want to be creating a game out of it, because I can imagine how that picture is looking. And there's a lot of flailing around, there's a lot of high voice, there's a lot of kind of everything's all right, you can do it, and the dog's just kind of taking jumps at you. So probably need to calm everything down, take it back a step, do a bit of counter conditioning around feeding time and things like that. But that would be my advice on that.
Make sure I keep my voice nice and low pitch.
Keep your voice nice and low. I know what
when
you're
I'm
like
getting
with your high voice.
Getting
What else have we got? Next question is, shall I use a crate or a pen with my puppy? Which is best? So for me, they're two different jobs. My crate is my puppy's rest area. My pen I'm going to use when I want to give my puppy free time, but limit or create a damage limitation effect. Yeah. So there's not so much if I fill my pen with things my puppy is allowed to interact with, they cannot possibly pick up bad habits. So I wouldn't sleep my puppy in the pen. I would sleep and put my puppy to rest in the crate, because if there's too much opportunity, if there's too much to do, my puppy might not rest, because if there's toys and shoes and things to play with. Yep. Puppies like toddlers, they need to be put to rest. I would physically put my puppy in the crate. Pen time is when I'm sat on the sofa watching TV. I want my puppy to learn how to accommodate to their human lifestyle without it getting anything wrong, I would put her chews in there, some maybe plush toys or whatever people want to do, some water in there maybe, depending if you're kind of doing a water schedule or whatever. But for me, they're two different jobs. Crate is your nap time, your rest time, and where you sleep overnight. Your pen is going to be where maybe some of your chew toys are and things like this, so you can learn to potter around. But the pen is essentially a damage limitation tool. How do you feel about that?
Exactly the same, but also from the flip side point of view, we've got a multi-dog household.
Yeah.
And I'm not concerned that my other dogs are going to try and intentionally harm her. Yeah. But obviously the size difference is huge. So it just kind of keeps her safe while they're pottering around as well. Yeah. So it's kind of like, it keeps her from getting herself into trouble, but then keeps her out of trouble with the multi-dog household. So.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. A pen and crates and things like this are a really good tool if you are introducing a puppy into a multi-dog household like you are. They can interact with each other, or they can sniff each other and at least see each other. But there's not really much that can go wrong when there's that big barrier in the way. Yeah. So yeah.
Barrier's not that big, but not for one of them. No. But no, 100%, because she significantly sees things differently when there's a crate and a bit of a barrier. She's had reactivity issues in the past. I think it makes
you're on about your older dog now.
Yeah, it makes her a lot more comfortable, which is also nice. And
just to touch on that, I think people rush into trying to make their new dogs best friends with their current dogs. And I think you're going to experience problems there. So another question we had, which we can lead on to now, is do you have any advice for littermate issues? So littermate issues, littermate syndrome typically comes when you have two, although it's not exclusively this context, but when you have two dogs that are from the same litter, that have grown up together because a silly breeder out there somewhere has gone and sold two dogs from the same litter. Yeah, it's a big no-no. People shouldn't do it. But if you've gone and got yourself two dogs, well, you're there now, aren't you? So littermate syndromes, or even introducing a puppy into a multi-dog household, I personally believe that puppy should be tracked as a separate entity to your other dogs for as long as you possibly can. If you've got two puppies, train them separately, sleep them in different rooms, walk them separately, play with them separately, everything separately, until you are very confident that the relationship you have with those dogs far outweigh the relationship they have with one another. So that's not things you want to fall into, because of when the dogs have such a strong relationship and you're not in that picture, there's a good chance then you might find they will contest for resource and things like that. And that's where littermate syndrome comes in, when they're fighting over the sofa and over food and over toys and things like this. So all that things should be kept away from the dogs, presented when you say so, and they should have lots of, what we would call crate and rotate time. So this is for people introducing a puppy, or you've gone and got yourself two puppies, everything separate for at least 6 months. Yeah, so yes, you want them to interact, but you want them to kind of coexist before anything else. You don't want to think about making them best friends. They just need to tolerate each other and things like that first. If they're friends, or if they do become friends, or are going to become friends, or not going to become friends, there's not much you can do about that anyway. So you might as well get the dogs to just coexist and learn to appreciate each other's place. And I think the way you do that is lots of separation, lots of segregation from one another, until you are very confident that no issues are going to arise because of you're in control. Does that make sense?
It was very comprehensive. Yeah. I'm cynical that people would do it when they've got two puppies, because the logistics with that would be hard. But
yes, people won't do that. People will not take that advice.
Won't do that. No, probably not.
Because I have seen it before, and the problems arise. They don't arise at 16 weeks. They don't arise at 20 weeks. They arise at 8 months, 9 months. Yep. The dog's come into season, or the balls drop, and we've got hormones flying around, and that's when we have fights. Yeah. And we go, all of a sudden, my worst case scenario I've ever seen of that is 3 dogs. Let's call them Rex, Rover, and Fido. They were Staffies cross Shar-Peis. They were all males.
And they all got...
And they were all living in the same house, in the same litter.
Wallop.
Now, that had escalated over 18 months so far that all they had to do was glance at one another before a full World War III would break out.
Okay.
But those puppies got on with each other like a house on fire until 8 or 9 months.
Sure. Yeah.
And then suddenly they decided to think, right, who's running this show?
Yeah.
And then, so 3 males. What's worse, they had the dad. So they had the dad and then these 3 18-month-old cross Shar-Peis, Staffies. And as you can imagine, we kind of said, we can't help you here.
No,
because you're living in a bungalow, you've got 3 of these dogs. Unfortunately, we need to kind of figure out alternate arrangements.
It's family logistics, not training.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's worst case scenario, but I've seen countless people bring us puppies at 7, 8 months.
Yep.
They're falling out over the smallest of things, but these seeds were planted early doors.
I think you touched on it probably less so than the falling out part, but almost the hypersocial part that we've seen with other dogs.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound as problematic, but I've seen it with my own too.
So by hypersocial, you mean?
In love with each other too much.
Yeah.
Or in love with other dogs more than you or I for our own dogs.
Yeah.
And the problems that causes, which is probably a topic for another time, but people can want their dogs to be almost too good a mates.
Yeah.
And like I had the similar issue with my 2 whereby we don't need to play with Dad because we've got each other. So then all of a sudden you just leads on to other little problems.
Yeah, if your dog is achieving fulfillment with the other dog that you own, and you then go and try and implement rules into your household, they're like, who are you?
Yeah.
Who do you think you are setting rules in the house? Because if we don't get anything good out of you, because we've got each other for that, we'll set rules with each other. And if that bond is greater than the bond you have with your dog, you'll find it very difficult to find engagement with your dog, to set rules with your dog, because you're just someone that occasionally tells them no. Yeah, where they're having all the fun in the world with each other. So that's a difficult one. It's a poignant one, but probably one to touch on later on. What have we got now, mate?
You kind of looking over that one. That was kind of covered, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So you've actually touched on this already. Should I start putting a collar and lead on in the house? Obviously, you kind of brushed on that with getting them used to having it being put on so you don't get bitten.
Yep.
But is it worth doing it from just a sensory point of view, getting them used to it being on, rather than just whacking it on and going outside and saying, come on, boy?
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly right. People will put the collar and lead on the dog. When we go and do a puppy consult and things like that, and we recommend that the lead goes on the dog in the house, people look at us like we've just slapped them in the face. And
worse,
But what we do is we take this puppy that has only ever known the confines of their home or your home or the breeder's home. We slap a piece of rope around their neck, or we tie a restrictive harness on, or whatever. We take them out into the big bad world, and we expect them to be okay with that. Yeah. That's very good recipe to get your puppy to hate being on the lead and to have all sorts of lead-based issues later on. So as you know, we recommend you tie a lead and a collar around the puppy's neck. You put a lightweight puppy line on, which the puppy can barely feel. But like you said, there is some sensory kind of... they will feel that the lead is on them at that point, and then it's not a huge transition or a kind of freak out moment when they inevitably get put on the lead outside the house for a walk. So make that transition for your dog as easy as you possibly can by introducing that lead in the home as quick as you possibly can, but around moments where your dog would probably want or around positive kind of things throughout the day, such as play and food and like we've touched on. So we don't need to talk about that again.
Beautiful. This is an interesting one. What bits of training, in inverted commas, should be focused on between 8 and 12 weeks?
You tell me what training is.
I suppose it depends on your definition, doesn't it? I mean, I would argue that you are training the puppy for life just by them being involved with your social day-to-day.
Yes.
My big point would be skills and behaviour different.
Yeah. So how many times do we get people bring us 12-week-old puppies and say, he knows sit, he knows down, he knows paw, he knows wait, he knows stay. And Yeah.
Paw gets
And
me.
our answer's always the same. What's paw used for?
Yeah.
If I were to get a puppy, all of that stuff would come 6 months and beyond.
Yeah.
Again, this is that bit of advice that people don't like listening to because they love getting their puppy doing new tricks for treats and cheese inside the kitchen. But really, your focus should be environmental exposure and socialization for that puppy.
Yeah.
I've got 4 dogs, all of which had been socialized and exposed differently in their puppyhood. I've got one dog that has had a clear lack of socialization and exposure in puppyhood, and then I have another dog who coincidentally had a very good critical learning period or socialization period or imprinting period, whatever you want to call it. Now, how well I can train the latter compared to my other dog Darla that hasn't been socialized, it is absolutely polarized. So if we could give any advice to a new puppy owner, is forget about paw, go and get your dog out, go and get your dog socialized, go and get your dog exposed to a plethora of environments. Don't fall into the trap where you're following the 15-minute rule and you can only go out your neighborhood, and then your puppy hits 16 weeks, they fall out of their imprinting period, and then you try and walk them in Roundhay Park or New Miller Dam, and then they freak out because they're exposed to all these novel things they've not seen during their imprinting period. Get your puppy out, get them exposed. Socialization should involve a number of different places. There are obviously things you should avoid in that period, but back to the question, in terms of training, I wouldn't be starting any formal obedience or commands until the puppy is at least 5 months old. I would definitely
Which probably sounds late to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But there's an argument like, what does the dog even need to sit for?
Yeah, you're exactly
for
right.
life, doesn't
Yeah.
it? It needs to not kill people.
Yeah.
Or other dogs.
Yeah. Essentially, in that puppy period of what's been outlined in the question here as 8 to 12 weeks or 8 to 16 weeks, that's how you're going to influence how your dog feels in adolescence and adulthood. And that should be a priority. By doing sit and paw and things like that, you're not really making an effort to change how your dog feels. You're teaching your dog skills, and I know this is your one that you say a lot. Yeah, if your puppy knows lots of skills, that's great. But if they're absolutely shit scared of the postman or that ice cream truck that's passing along down the road, they're not going to sit anyway because of how they feel in that moment is terrified.
Precisely.
So don't worry about the tricks. Get your dog out, hand feed your dog when you're outside and things like this, and make sure that going outside you've got lots of engagement and you're making outside and certain things a positive experience. Don't worry about paw. Don't even worry about sit. Like you said, all of our dog knows sit, and it's part of our curriculum. It is part of our curriculum.
Certification.
This is part of our certification. But it's not absolutely necessary, especially at that age. So work on engagement and making sure that you're the best thing in the world to your dog. You've got the right relationship, and your dog is environmentally exposed, and they're not freaking out when they're faced with novel things.
Beautiful.
It probably is going to be worth... so we're going to film that sort of work with your dog.
Yep.
And then we'll add it to our website or whatever we need to do.
Yep.
But I think it's probably worth touching on what people think socialization is and what it's not.
Yeah.
So what do you think the average person thinks socialization is?
Well, more than average, or more than should happen.
The majority of people?
Me the dog, me the dog, me the dog, me
Yep.
the dog, me the dog, me the dog, me the dog,
Yep.
me the dog,
Yep.
and me another dog.
Yeah. How many of the dogs that are brought to us with reactivity issues, or any dog that's brought to us, are hypersocial?
More than... Oh, I'd argue more than there is on the
Fearful side.
Fearful side, yeah. You see, fearful's hard to diagnose, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
But usually it's all... Can I say the word? The dirty word?
You can say the
Goes to a dog walker.
Yeah, the dog
3 or
walker.
4 times a week.
Yep.
And then he just changed.
Yep.
Because usually there's an innocuous, moment where, I don't know, they get hurt, they get nipped, and all of a sudden, dogs are terrible.
Yeah. So
and it's difficult. You can get a single event learning, and then that's it. And it's very hard to then reverse.
If someone brings us a dog
Yeah.
and they are reactive, there's typically two reasons why they're reactive. And that is because of, one, they're either hypersocial, because they have had too much free interaction with other dogs, and they have found loads of value in other dogs through puppyhood, through puppy heart parties and doggy daycares and play dates and things like this. Or the other side of things, they are fearful of dogs, and that usually comes from lack of exposure or some sort of trauma that has happened.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Now, when you go on the overzealous side, when you're socializing your dog and they're meeting every single dog, and a lot of dogs, and we're talking volume now, so they're meeting a lot of dogs, all you're doing is increasing your chances of your dog falling into one of those two categories, right?
Yeah.
Because if they're either, best case scenario, going to want to be best friends with every dog, and you're going to be that person with a dog barking on the end of the lead that's frustrated that they can't meet the other dog and saying, it's all right, he just wants to say hello. Or, worst case scenario, your hypersocial puppy runs up and paws the wrong dog in the face. They have an adverse experience by getting a nip, or like you kind of suggested, and then suddenly they're fearful of dogs. So, what's the right answer?
There is no right answer. But minimal controlled exposure, I suppose.
Yeah.
And as neutral to marginally positive as possible. But then that's incredibly hard to define.
Yeah, very difficult.
Like, with obviously our dogs, sometimes I like them to completely ignore dogs, and they will. But that's only because of time. One of my dogs is fearfully aggressive.
Yeah.
Or unsure aggressive, I would say. Yeah. I don't think she's necessarily scared.
Uncertain aggressive.
But her way of dealing with the unknown is be reactive.
Yeah.
Which is what you were saying if they're undercooked a little bit. I think a lot of people find it hard to get their head around the fact that you can cause these problems by overexposure.
Yeah.
I really, really struggle with it. And to be fair, I probably did until you explained it in a very lovely way.
Probably not.
No, it was good.
Was it lovely, or was it abrupt and to the point? And
it was abrupt and to the point, but that's how I like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It works.
So, yeah, different things work for different people. So, and it's the same with puppies. So, the reason we don't do puppy classes is because we might have 6 dogs in that class, and we get rang every single day, can my dog come to puppy classes? And we say, we don't do puppy classes, and they hang the phone up, right? But the reason we don't is because there might be 6 dogs in that class, and those 6 dogs need different levels or avenues of socialization to get the optimal result when they come into adolescence. Now, the whippet in the corner that's shaking like a leaf does not need that black Labrador to come up and paw him in the face. Because of later on down the line, that whippet is going to react in order to create distance from that black Labrador, because the last time he met a black Labrador, he pawed him in the face. Now, that black Labrador that's running around, pawing everyone in the face and having the time of his life, well, that's what he's practicing. He's going to practice how to be a total... Whopper. Yeah, we'll call him a whopper. Being explicitly told we can't swear today. A whopper, and he's going to come out of that class a hypersocial dog, thinking it's great, and every time he sees another dog, he's going to be a Royal Rumble. Now, so for that dog, I'd say, well, he needs his neck wound in and he needs to do a lot of engagement work with the handler. And then for the whippet, he should meet one of our dogs, Blue or Ranger or Toph, so he can have a nice, controlled, calm, not where someone's going to pile over him. But when we say we don't do puppy classes to people, they go, oh, right, okay, well, that's what I want to do, that's what I have to do. Yeah. But I would argue that puppy classes would only be beneficial for about 1 in 10 dogs. The other 9, your dog's going to come out worse than probably when they started, because they're either going to become more fearful of dogs, or they're going to learn to ignore you in the presence of other dogs.
Yeah. I suppose the issue with it is it doesn't happen acutely. No. So your dog doesn't become either way that you wouldn't want them to within that moment. So you might, first class, oh yeah, they really loved it. Second class, oh yeah, really loved it. By the time you get to the end of your block of classes, the dog's a bit of a whopper when I take it to Roundy Park. So, but it doesn't happen acutely, so it's not like, oh, this is what did it. Yeah. It's just kind of an extended exposure to that environment.
It's seeds that are planted. Seeds that are planted, and then what do seeds do? They
Germinate.
Blue. Germinate.
Is that the thing?
They flounder.
Flounder.
Is that what-
I think that's a fish. A fish is a flounder, but yeah, you can flounder around. But that's kind of like a... It's like mincing.
Flourish. Seeds don't
flourish.
flourish. Flowers flourish. Seeds...
At some point flourish.
Sow.
I'm sure they
You sow your
germinate.
seeds.
Yeah, but once the seed is sown...
We'll cut all this
Then
out.
it's
This is fucking
germinated.
bullshit. Right, okay. Leave it in. Right, we'll move on.
There is no on. Oh no, there is.
We're on 38 minutes.
Oh, gee. Are we going? Enough of the seed. So last question. You said you'd save this one for later because it's a biggie.
It's a biggie. A
I'll
lot
be
of our
quick-
questions that were given to us were about this topic.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt.
I'll term it in the terms of the specifics of this one.
Okay.
16-week-old cockapoo.
Yep.
Bites. Mostly the lady's daughter. Intentionally going for no reason sometimes, or what would appear to be no reason perhaps. Other times it's because the daughter tries to stroke or interact, play with the dog. It's like the dog hates her. How should they react to it to stop it happening? We do use the cage or crate for timeout when she calms down, but it makes no real difference. I assume that means that when she gets back out, she just cracks on with the biting.
So it does look like it's become habitual.
Yep.
Biting the daughter has brought about reinforcement. This has probably started because of children, more animated, louder. They flail their hands around. When we watch you play with your dogs, you run around like a toddler. Yeah, and that gets the most out of them. So that's probably why she has started biting.
Yep.
Why she's still biting, maybe a different story, but it does sound like it's been habitual. In this case, you need to take a step back. I would suggest that if you want your daughter and your dog to be cohesive to one another, they need to, I mean, no disrespect by this next comment, but they need to be treated like littermates. You know, they shouldn't be kind of freely interacting with each other. I know that might seem counterintuitive initially, because if you want your dog to want to interact with your daughter, you want your daughter to interact with your dog, but chances are they've got off on the wrong foot. Your daughter has probably picked the dog up in a way she doesn't like, is stroking her in a way she doesn't like. I know kids are terrible around dogs. People think kids and dogs are a really good idea. They're probably not the best idea. I don't know what their kind of interactions on a day-to-day basis are looking like. There is either your daughter is annoyed or kind of given the dog an adverse experience at one point, or your dog is just finding there is fun in biting your daughter. When it comes to puppy biting, a little bit like socialization, every case is different because we have to figure out why is the puppy biting. More often than not, though, when people bring us a puppy and they're overly biting, we are reinforcing that behavior. Worst case scenario, you're giving the dog a toy and things like that. You're flailing your hands around. I don't like the crossing arms and turning the back method because I think that creates something the dog really wants. So if I snatch a toy off my dog and we're playing with each other, I'll turn my back on him and kind of run away from him, and he'll go, "Oh, I really want that. Stop trying to keep that." So I don't really like that method. A lot of the time, and I can't give the definite answer in this context, a lot of the time the puppy is overtired. They're under-rested. We are unintentionally reinforcing the behavior by flailing around, doing the high-pitched squeal and things like this. Some puppies are just having fun biting, and some puppies are having fun hurting you. People don't like to admit that, but if you go and say then, ouch, or do whatever you want to be doing in that moment because that's what you've read online, there could be an element of reinforcement there. Yeah. The irony of this is when we take puppies on residential and people wanting us to help their dogs in their critical learning period, we don't ever have to acutely deal with the puppy biting because of the puppy is either crated and sleeping. They can't bite you when they're sleeping. They are brought out. They are playing with a toy because we have started a game. They are on a house line, so if they did try anything on, we can immediately stop it in the moment, or they're on a walk, or they're eating, or they're doing a food-based activity. I think people give their puppy too much freedom. The puppy realizes that biting humans or putting teeth on human skin is fun and it brings around a response. People are always saying to us their puppy has a mad hour at 7 o'clock, and that's usually where people are sat on the sofa ignoring their dog, and the puppy runs around thinking, What could I do? Oh, I know what works. Biting. I'm going to go and I'm going to bite some socks and I'm going to bite some. And then we try and push the puppy off and things like that. And all the things that would reinforce a puppy. And then it becomes habitual. So the answer here is, right, the puppy and daughter need to learn to ignore each other, put a house line on, use your crate, have a firm word with your daughter saying to leave your poor puppy alone, and then reassess it 2 months down the line. So that would be my best guess on that one. It's only a short question. Any thoughts?
Comprehensive.
Again.
Lovely. Yeah. That's probably about it. I think we've covered all the main puppy questions, biting and feeding and crate and things like that, or the most popular ones we had. Like I said, we had more specific ones that probably won't justify me waffling on for 45 minutes. Does anything?
No, probably not. So, I think that's our first podcast ticked off.
Hopefully we'll get better.
We'd just like to thank our sponsor, Poppy's Potting Shed, the best leaves in Leeds. Give us this plant here. It is P. Diddy, the Peace Lily. So go check her out. She's on Instagram. She's very vocal on there. Loves posting about herself. You literally have to skip her.
Even the dog's named after a plant.
Even her dog is named after a plant. So.
Is she in the video? She's coming in.
Yeah.
Bring her in. Give it to Big Jacob.
Come on, lass. Quick before George is coming.
It has.
And here is our little project Fern, the French Bulldog. So you're going to see lots of material and footage and training tutorials with this little one. But yes, she's only 9 weeks old now. And she's doing great, aren't you? Yeah, so thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening thus far.
Was that directed at me? I like to listen to you.
And, yeah. And we'll catch you next time where we're going to look at reactivity. The most popular topic requested. So, it'll be a good one. Bye.